have really reached an awkward stage in the Emmanuel Harrow case. There's no real updates coming in. Law enforcement claims they might know where Emmanuel is, but there's no active searches. Instead, there's a lot of finger pointing going on. Law enforcement officials are playing the blame game because the public is questioning why Jake was not properly punished for what he did to his daughter. So now we have the DA blaming the judge for letting Jake off. We have the judge blaming a former DA for letting Jake off. We have the public asking questions. We got people now blaming the current DA for Jake getting off. Meanwhile, the current DA is getting frustrated, and solely because this conversation is happening about Jake getting off for hurting his last kid, the DA is trying to silence everyone in this case. Instead of putting out updates, letting us know what's going on with the investigation, instead of leading a search to find Emmanuel's remains, law enforcement officials seem to be more concerned with people talking, with people exposing how bad this area is, how this area always lets people off easy after they hurt kids. So when you see the DA and the sheriff come out, they're all angry or pretending to be angry, and they're telling people to be quiet, don't discuss the case. It's not because Emmanuel. It's not because they think that us making videos and speculating is jeopardizing their investigation. No. The reason they're constantly speaking out now, attacking the media and attacking independent media for talking about this case, the reason they're doing that is because much of the conversation is surrounding Jake and his history. And the fact that Jake was let off time and time again after hurting kids. And it's making them look bad on a national level. These type of things happen all the time, but they don't get national attention. So the people of California just have to deal with this nonsense. Well, now the rest of America is watching. So all of these little DAs and sheriffs and judges, they're all scurrying like roaches when you cut the lights on. Because now we have a magnifying glass on them. We're looking into things. We're finding things out. And they hate it. So instead of, hey, this is the update on the Emmanuel Harrow investigation. Here's where we believe he is. Instead of that, it's, hey, please stop talking about this case. It's the judge's fault. No, it's the DA's fault. No, it's my fault. No, it's his fault. No, it's their fault. That's what we're watching play out right now. And my thing is, like, look, if you want to point fingers and play the blame game, can you do it after we find Emmanuel? Y'all said y'all have a strong indication as to where he's at. There have been 0 searches since that press conference. Can y'all go find Emmanuel and then fight? And then blame each other for the problems that y'all caused? Because every single last person involved in Jake's prior case, from the judge to the DA, they're all partially responsible for him getting off without having to serve any time, without him having to suffer any consequences, allowing him to go back out on the streets, conceive more children for him to hurt. Because that's what Jake does. He has babies so he can hurt them. But they're playing the blame game on the news. We got former DAs speaking out, trying to take the heat off the judge and place the blame elsewhere. I want to go ahead and roll this clip so you can see a little bit of that play out. But before I roll that clip, if you guys enjoy the channel, consider supporting the channel in one of these many free and easy ways. All you got to do is hit the like button, subscribe, drop a comment, share the video. And if you really like my content, if you really support the channel, and you want to see it keep going, you could always donate via Cash App or Super Thanks. Always greatly appreciated so much. Now, with that being said, let's roll this news clip. Then I'll be right back with more.
Jake Harrow is maintaining the couple's innocence in this new jailhouse interview. He denies claims of authorities who say that the baby had been abused by his parents throughout his 7-month-old life. Authorities say the baby then allegedly died of those injuries. Jake claims he's been cooperating with investigators, but Harrow's cooperation is proving as frustrating as his wife's original story to police. Remember, she claimed a stranger assaulted her in a parking lot and then abducted the baby. Jake has assisted in the search for the missing baby boy. You can see him on the screen there in the orange prison jumpsuit out in that dusty terrain. But that search of that field turned up no evidence that the baby was ever there. Authorities now say, however, that they have, quote, a strong indication of where the little boy's body is. Meanwhile, outrage is growing over another case involving Jake Harrow from 2 years ago and another baby of his, a baby girl who authorities say is permanently disabled by Jake's violent acts. Jake pleaded guilty to child abuse in that case, but despite the hideous injuries the 10-week-old baby girl suffered, he never served any time in prison. The district attorney says that if the judge had put him behind bars, the baby Emmanuel would still be alive today. Joining us now is Kim Dagonia, former assistant district attorney from Riverside County, California. Thanks so much for joining us. So the current DA, Mike Hestrin, had really harsh words for the judge in that previous Jake Harrow case. Hestrin said it was, quote, an outrageous error in judgment and that a baby is now dead because of it.
He did, and I think Sheriff Chad Bianco said it best when he started the news conference and indicated that there were several opportunities and several people to blame for why baby Haro is no longer with us and why Jake Haro is not in custody. The reality is that had the Riverside County District Attorney's Office charged that actual complaint properly, we wouldn't be here. Jake would not have been able to even conceive Emmanuel Haro because he did not charge what is the most basic charge, which is the assault with a child under the age of 8 causing paralysis.
Yeah, he was charged with child cruelty. I mean, we've got the current DA blaming the judge in the case, and you're saying actually it was the former DA's mistake?
Correct. If the former DA would have filed the charges correctly, that would have tied the judge's hands. He would have been unable to sentence Jake Haro to probation. He would have had to have sentenced Jake Haro to life with the possibility of parole. The judge would not have been able to sentence him to probation. The charges were simply pled improperly. They were too low.
So what about what Jake Harrow was saying? It's unbelievable he's giving interviews from jail. Is he admitting that his baby is dead now or not?
I mean, it seems to be that way. You know, he's taken the police on this wild goose chase to an alleged crime scene. That in of itself would suggest that he's admitting the baby is gone. Making these statements now, I think, is further just incriminating him, and people can read between the lines that he is telling us that baby Emmanuel is gone.
Authorities say they have a good idea of where the baby's body is. They believe that he had suffered abuse throughout his 7-month-old life, which is horrific to even think about. What do you think makes them think that? Do they have evidence?
You know, Elizabeth, I'm sure they do. I'm sure Mike Hestrin is very detailed when he does backgrounds, when he does investigations. I'm sure they did search warrants into Emmanuel's pediatrician. But the reality is, common sense tells us he injured a 10-week-old baby a few years ago. Horrific, horrific injuries, which indicate that he squeezed the baby, he shook the baby, he probably hit the baby with something. I mean, those are really traumatic injuries.
Yeah, let's just remind our audience, broken ribs on that 10-week-old baby girl, a fractured skull on that 10-week-old baby girl, brain swelling, a fractured leg. Kim, it's almost unbelievable to consider what you'd have to do to that tiny infant for her to suffer injuries like that. She's permanently disabled.
That's exactly right. She's permanently disabled. So we can look at Jake Harrow's history of how he treats his children, and it's not a far leap to suggest that likely Emmanuel Haro is being abused in the same manner because his life was ultimately taken.
Yeah, this is a terrible, terrible case, but obviously we will continue to follow it as the authorities search not just for the baby's body, but for answers. This is really Yeah, a lot of people are paying very close attention to this. Kim.
Well, let me start by saying that I am glad that she acknowledged that if Jake was properly punished for what he did to his daughter, Emmanuel would have never been conceived. I'm glad that she pointed that out because the DA, the sheriff, and other law enforcement officials and investigators said multiple times during the press conference that if Jake was properly punished, Emmanuel would still be here today. Now, that's an easy mistake to make, especially when speaking publicly, just speaking fluently out of your mind. I've probably made that mistake. Other people have made the mistake as well, I'm sure. So I'm not trying to be too judgmental about that here. But these are people who are in charge of the investigation. These are people who are in charge of this case. These aren't people sitting at home next to a popcorn machine in Reptar. Okay? So if I accidentally say something by mistake, or another YouTuber or TikToker accidentally says something by mistake, I feel like that's a little different than the DA and the sheriff and lead investigators saying things and making mistakes in their statements, because it kind of makes me feel like they aren't even really invested in the story enough to kind of understand that, hey, if Jake was put in jail, in prison, Emmanuel would have never been conceived. It makes me feel like they aren't really aware of the timeline, are not as aware as they should be. Or at the very least, they're willing to just talk without actually, making sure that every piece of information they share is factual. So that threw me off during the press conference. I didn't make a big deal about it, but I'm sure it threw other people off as well. So I'm glad that she acknowledged that right off the bat. Now, you guys can let me know. Am I being irrational here? Am I overreacting here? Because I'm growing frustrated because it seems like at least right now in the Emmanuel Harrow story, it seems like more of the focus is going towards taking heat off of law enforcement for their past mistakes as opposed to focusing solely on finding Emmanuel. I don't want to see statements from the DA getting mad that people are making YouTube and TikTok videos when Emmanuel hasn't been found yet, and I don't see anyone actively searching for him. I don't want to hear the DA playing the blame game with the judge and everyone pointing fingers, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, while Emmanuel still has not been found. Is that an irrational take? I want Emmanuel to be found before y'all start fighting about the last case. But that's where we're at. Make no mistake about it, folks. That is exactly where we're at. Half of that press conference they did about Emmanuel was basically the blame game, blaming everything on the judge for letting Jake off. Since then, we've only heard them basically lash out at the media and independent media. And look, I do think that Jake's last case is important. A conversation needs to be had about how Jake got off. That needs to change. I get it. But that ship already sailed. Unfortunately, that ship already sailed. His child has already been left severely brain damaged, bedridden. Now another child is dead. That ship from the last case, unfortunately, sadly, it has sailed. So instead of focusing all of our energy and time, and when I say our, I mean their, energy and time on, oh man, it's your fault. How did we do this? How did this happen? How about you find Emmanuel? Put that energy towards making sure that this doesn't happen again in this current case. Because the last case already happened. It should have never went down that way. I do believe conversations need to be had, but those conversations do not need to dominate. Right? Conversations about the last case don't need to dominate this case to the point that we're seeing more energy from law enforcement put towards the last case as opposed to this one. And it's not like they're solving anything or doing anything in the last case. No, they're just blaming everyone else for problems that they all caused together. So I don't think it's irrational to just want Emmanuel to be found before we open up another can of worms and all of this infighting happens between law enforcement and judges about who's to blame for this and who's to blame for that. And I apologize to my audience for being frustrated in this case over the last couple of days, but I can't help it. And I feel like all of this blaming and finger pointing, it's not helping anything, because at the end of the day, nothing's going to change out there. None of those people are going to be held accountable for letting Jake off. So if anything, it's kind of just a waste of time, as Emmanuel's remains are God knows where. Law enforcement says they may know where. But yeah, I'm just hoping that sometime today, sometime tomorrow, we get an update and they find something. I don't want the updates to continue to be law enforcement crying because people are speculating about the case, or the DA blaming this, or the judge blaming this. Just find that freaking baby. Find that baby, and then everything else can come after that. But for now, you guys let me know what you think about this down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all very soon in the next one.